Company, Maria Sabina Dry Cleaning Service.
Where is this at?
Huautla.
Huautla.
Huautla,
The town's
Oaxaca.
called
Is it up or down?
Sabina unofficially.
Huautla is down.
The other side.
The other side,
It's
yes.
towards Oaxaca? Or down towards the beach?
Huautla?
Yeah.
Oh, what? Not
Huautla, Maria
Huautla.
Sabina.
Huautla, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of names that are all kind of,
Really
they start like
similar,
that.
yeah.
Huautla. That's where Maria Sabina's house is. I went there and met grandmother Julieta Casimiro, one of the 13 indigenous grandmothers to the United Nations. They got some from every continent, indigenous grandmothers. And I met with her. She represents the Mazatec grandmothers in the traditions of Maria Sabina. 90-year-old woman, but looks like she's 38 or something, just glowing. I mean, you look at her and you're like, these medicines work. I mean, you know what I mean? She's like 90, but just this beautiful complexion and joy, and her stories, and she's, chopping firewood, still has cooks over wood stoves with clay pots, for everyone. I mean, so humble. For me, it was like meeting the Dalai Lama. You know what I mean? And it's a dirt floor in most areas, outdoor kitchen, just real simple. She kept saying, my home is very modest, but I would like you to stay here, And so
Wow.
stayed in her rooms in her house. She's got quite a few extra rooms, but yeah, the mushroom ceremony is amazing. It's like 5-6 hours of seeing, And one of the first things she told me, she said, we were poor, and we were the peasants, and we could not read. And so the mushroom was given to us so that we could also know God.
Whoa.
Talking about Catholicism, like they couldn't read, they just taught, they were taught, but they couldn't read and they couldn't really know about God except for what they were told.
Right.
And that was one of the first statements she told me, and I just was like, I still write that story. It's beautiful.
And what strand of mushrooms does she have? Is it different than the one that's here?
Well, at the time, I couldn't tell them apart. I still can't. I still got to ask Acacea to be sure. But I'm pretty sure there's a Mazatec down there.
In Huautla?
In Huautla? Maria Sabina's family?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a Mazatec village.
Aztec Quorum.
Aztec
Quorum primarily.
That's right, they are landslides.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
So those are the Peritos Saniquitos is what they
so
call
they
it.
were some, that's what I remember. And so they served the mushrooms there with cacao beans. There's a mild MAOI in the cacao. Cacao is very heart opening. It goes real well with the mushrooms because that's also very heart opening. Cacao. And then to have this grandmother, her singing is just so beautiful. I mean, you just lay there and just cry. The beautiful ancient song. Yeah, I mean, she does that's also part of the combination too. Wow. Sweet Ruby Mansion flowers. Except for at her house, okay, right at her gate. It's a white brugmansia that has a flower. Then another flower shooting out of that.
Like that picture of Datura.
It's a chain.
Egypt, that Kalindi
Each flower was a chain of 3 flowers telescoping like this. So I got a few from her.
In real life.
Yeah.
At the crib.
They're like this long.
Not on
They're like this long. They're like this long. And the little Catholic candles? The little jar candles with the Virgin Mary. She's got an altar up there. She's got this long things like this big. And she's, after we've taken the mushrooms and they're starting to come on, people are starting to look drowsy and lay down. She walks over and she holds that flower over those candles. And it just starts to billow smoke and it fills the whole room full of Datura smoke. And that's when the electrical, it's like neon flux. like anime cartoons.
I always wanted to see her. How do I get to go see her?
Well, she just passed away. So I have not been back to that town but you could still go meet Daniel, which is Maria Sabina's nephew. You can go sit in Maria Sabina's house. Her tools, her little grinders. We sat out in her own personal garden out behind the house. You love it. You love it.
We've been wanting to see it.
I mean, setting in her
Wanting to
house
see
where
it.
the Beatles sat, where all these guys, Timothy Leary, they all sat in that room and ate mushrooms.
The Beatles came to see Maria Sabina?
Oh yeah. I heard back
Yeah, I
then,
guess
like
she
there
has
was a
Beatles
lot of
poster in
it
her
had to be
house.
done with donkeys.
Yeah,
You had
there
to
was the
walk
roads.
these sections.
you literally had to like.
You could make it here, but then you had to pack everything up. And then for a while, I heard that the federales weren't letting anybody up here.
Yeah.
You know, they sent the National Guard, and then people had to start sneaking in. So then there was like these guys, local guys. This is what Tom Lane was telling me, that they had to come in like through these crazy mountain roads with just a trail of donkeys and all their backpacks strapped to the donkeys, and they had to walk, for days through the mountains to get in without being discovered by the National Guard. There was hippies from everywhere flocking down there. You know what I mean?
Tell me about the salvia with the mushrooms, though. That was what you were going to. That's what you were about to go into, and then you switched.
Not me. I don't know what she said.
Oh,
I was the one who did that.
I don't even like standing near that.
Like I was 90 miles out in the middle of nowhere when I took this.
There's no time
Okay?
away from me.
Like I didn't have any like electronics or anything back then. We had a shed on raw land in the middle of the Sonoran Chiricahua desert region. I took salvia and a tea, and I actually did switch it around. We hadn't met yet, but I was actually back there, back when my hair was short and my Facebook name was Kaylin. I took some of that, and then I actually had grown my own mushrooms, poor man's tech, in like 110 degrees. I had my own. I had grown back then. It's like 3 years ago.
Yeah, 3, 4, something like that. Yeah.
Something around that. And so I ate the golden teachers that were fresh with the salvia tea. Walked out in my backyard, like all of like the creosote bushes, like
over
where
there
peyote would
exploring, and all
grow
of a
under.
sudden-
There's a storm, and I see it coming. It's like it's like 50 meters out, and I'm like, it's like a little cloud. Looks like it's a freaking cartoon cloud. Like what the heck?
Coming
Dude,
straight for us.
It's coming right over my head, and the salvia's like, you should go inside. And I'm like, I did not ask that question. Well, I did, didn't I? Okay. So I go back inside, back away a little bit further, walk into the cabin, just a little ways, and I see this branded S being burned into the ceiling. And I'm like,
this can't
what's
be
that
good.
mean? Huh?
This can't be good.
And no. So I
It
was
wasn't
like, okay, I'm just going to relax. So I lay down on the love seat. It's like 5 feet away from the
We can
window.
shop in here.
Freaking next thing I know, bolt shots through the window, blew up the fan, blew up the solar inverter.
Luckily,
And I'm extremely calm.
she
because
was.
Salvia
She's like,
warned me.
chill. She's
I'm
like,
like,
oh yeah. Well,
neighbor
this
comes over.
this battery's smoking. Should we do something?
Yeah, just calm. And I'm like, call the neighbor. I never call a neighbor. Dude comes out, no shirt on. This is
Got
desert.
fire extinguisher.
Like been out in the
Thankfully.
desert for 50 years, no shirt.
That's his dress code.
With his beer. He's drinking his beer. He comes in. He's like, what do you need disconnected? I was like, that right there is like a marine deep cycle battery that's like bubbling over. He's like, okay. And he walks out. And
I was gonna disconnect it for her, but she wouldn't let me.
Dude just walks out, walks like back into the distance, into the desert.
Wow.
My window's smoking.
Well,
Got a big black
to
dot
be
on it.
fair, he was indigenous. He's probably
Right.
he's kind of tough, tough guy.
So that was your only experience of putting them together?
No, I actually had experiences later with it by itself.
Oh,
And I can say that in proximity to mushroom ceremony, like day of, drinking salvia after mushrooms, it was like Bufo in the memes that you are sitting, but then the fall floors out from under you. But you are the floor.
yeah.
And it was pleasant. It was pleasant. It was severe, but it was pleasant. And it taught me the meaning of sound. Like it had me going and studying the Buddhist texts about the sound healers, like the deities who are around to hear the divinity, the organization, every particle of sound, audio.
Does that normally happen for you? Because that's like a sequence of events thing for me. So like something will happen on a trip that will make you say, when I get back, let me go study
Yep.
this.
That's what I always do. It's always been research since day one. Like I found out about Tamarian Institute and whatnot through one of my experiences. I didn't know about it until after I took the mushroom, and then the synchronicity of events led me to want to cultivate mushrooms, which led me to Kai Wingo, which led me to Kalendi.
Who's Kai Wingo?
Kai Wingo is one of Kalendi's ex-wives. Well,
Late
not ex,
wives.
she's passed.
Late wives.
Late wife.
Okay.
Excuse me. She was very inspiring to me when I was a teenager.
Oh.
I actually changed my name to Kaylin on Facebook when I was a teenager doing mushrooms because of her. I was so inspired by her mushroom farms and the Women in Entheogens conference that she was planning and whatnot. Like, that right there changed my life because I was introduced to mushrooms around a Houston community of psychonauts. We're mainly into peyote and San Pedro, and there was no one I could relate to. So when I was able to relate to her, that's how I really started studying mushrooms.
So in the 5% community, we would call somebody like that our enlightener. Or this man was my enlightenment. So,
Yeah.
So would you consider her maybe
No.
be your enlightenment, or it was somebody? I'm into mushrooms.
It was earlier than that.
Okay.
It was when I was like 4 years old, trying to break in on the internet.
Oh.
My dad was a computer engineer, Googling my own name, trying to figure out what Acacea was. And coming across psychoactives and psychedelics, and the internet was new for me. I was sitting at a community college. My
You were
dad
4?
was in school, yeah. I was homeschooled.
And you were trying to find out what your name meant.
Yeah.
Yep.
But, you know, I was in college when I was 12, you know, so I had a short, I had some places to be, so I had to get some things out of the way.
Oh. So she is old as hell.
Yes.
Okay.
She really is.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, we had to talk about that.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
She came back early.
You escaped the astral plane.
Something like
Well,
that.
I don't remember not being here, so I guess I've always been here.
But this
Yeah.
is true. This is true for a few thousand years anyway.
Yeah.
I say at least a good 200,000 or 300,000 years by my personal experience of gauging soul ages through my experience as a semi OG. You are super old. I know some folks who are 50, 60, 70 who have very young souls. And so there's when I get back home, I'll like even send it to you, like in a class I took that was showing how you can identify levels of ages of souls. There's 5 levels, and like you're in 4 or 5, something like that. So you're like you are you. We're gonna start with that. But you're what Mother Teresa was trying to do. See what I'm saying? But yeah, like that's kind of the energy, you know what I'm saying? But due to the technology that we have currently, that can't be stopped, you won't be able to get isolated like she was. She was able to get isolated like you like to be isolated because there was no technology now. If she was here now, she'd be on Facebook because somebody be recording her and asking her questions, right? And you know what I'm saying? When you sat down and did a live about a month ago and was like, yeah, I'm down here in Mexico, I was like, look at little, I was like, that's Acacia. But now like the download is telling me like very similar to that energy because your desire is very different than mine. Well, we have 2 different strategies of doing it. We have same goal, different plan. Let's help thousands.
Yeah.
But the way you go about it is quite different than mine. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe just a little dimension, cellophane, thin dimension away.
Don't really have a lot of time on this earth.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's,
Well, I mean,
time doesn't exist. So.
Right.
My point exactly.
I mean, even if you do 200 years of, even if you do 200 laps, that's still not a lot of time. So like me, I have a 150-year agenda. You know what I'm saying? Which still is short. Like I don't really see
We came
how
on the last end, yeah.
I don't see how folks can really get a lot done on 70 years. Like
Well, that's where we have the medicines that allow us to time travel and also allow us to stop time, restart, go back and send ourselves information, explode our DNA consciously. Basically, 12 strands of genetic information that you can heal and restore means that you can completely change. You can go back to Methuselah time. Time to you will be 700 years instead of 70 years. Because you spend every second in a femto universe that takes you 100 years further. But it's difficult to stay grounded in this dimension if you're always doing that.
So you have to come back.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you have to stay grounded. Otherwise, you're not good. You're not much good to anybody if you're flowing through 10 dimensions at once trying to study. You come back and you finally get back with information. Tell it sounds like gibberish.
Yeah. That lecture that you did at the Detroit Psychedelic, was that last year? When you talked about the sperm and the egg when they collide. What'd you say? 1,500 gigabytes of all of your life experiences, like genetic data hits then. So like,
and that's at the zinc activation. That's when the molecule activates. It's like a flash download of genetic trauma. A lot of interesting upgrades, like the pearls of generations and generations of evolution. That pearl you get to activate. Now, if you identify with your genetic junk, then you're going to activate in the other direction.
Oh boy!
But if you activate with the highest 1% of your ancestors' soul fiber, that spark of intelligence, that one switch clicks and you become superhuman. You start moving laterally and non-linearly throughout time and space. You catch yourself in other people's eyes. You put yourself certain places and you're looking at yourself from 6 dimensions above consciousness. You're watching the puzzle pieces, but consciously interacting with each puzzle piece, even if someone else is unconscious. And then synchronicities just fall into place.
Start jumping off.
You put in your interdimensional SOS and start bridging bonds, sharing information with houses.
Pause. Interdimensional SOS. Break that down. Expand upon that a little bit. Interdimensional SOSs.
Going to a 0 point blank state in time where you can travel your conscious time construct to a point where you can put out a homing signal to the consciousness that is you, that was around you and placed around you during certain portions of your life that you maybe have been unconscious of. Since you get to a certain point in your development and you realize that the people who come into your life are essentially reflections of yourself coming back. If you go back to when you were a kid, you do the same thing and you start recognizing who was around you, who stayed around you, who was watching you, who was listening. And you see yourself in that reflection. You gather that information like a fly on the wall, wherever you are at in time. You go back and look through George Washington's eyes, if that's one of the ancestors that you can pull from. But it's really connected to the Akashic records of your soul. What ancestors you can pull information from by unlocking that within your genetics.
Future ancestors too?
Like sometimes, people call it channeling, but if you really consciously, I guess you could say, co-participate with the consciousness of your grandparents, understanding that it's you, following that link of consciousness allows you to look through their eyes completely. And it's no longer a separation because you step into that complete oneness. It's no longer superficial flat. It's a living perpendicular.
When people try to do that without the use of entheogens, am I pronouncing that right? What do you think? Does the difficulty level rise when you just try to do it like by yourself?
Nope. In fact, if anything, connecting with your ancestors is a lot simpler before entheogenics, because once you become conscious, maybe you seek to want them to feel a certain kind of way about what you're doing. If you are connecting with your ancestors without entheogens to begin with, then your ancestors really respect you doing what they would do. They really respect you walking in their shoes. And then you're naturally looking through their eyes because you're activating those codes within your own self. So you can do it just as simply. it becomes even more difficult when you see the visual manifestation of that happening. It becomes more confusing to the mind. Trying to fit that kind of quantum information from levels of consciousness that are ascended into this mind, when you bring it back, what you saw may have been exactly spot on, but what you say afterwards tells a completely different story.
Okay, let's go start a fire.